Today's lesson is an introduction to multiplication. So let's begin our lesson by going over our vocabulary for our lesson. So our important vocabulary is addition, and we have it written over here for us to refer to during our lesson. But addition is the process of putting numbers together. Then we have multiplication, or to multiply, which is the process of repeated addition. And multiplication seems like a really big, scary word, but we're not going to let that word scare us. We're not going to be afraid of it. We're going to meet it head on, and we're going to learn some really cool things about multiplication. Because if we remember from our last lesson and our addition, is that sometimes we have to look for patterns. And as we're looking for our patterns and we're looking to see what fits and what doesn't fit, sometimes we notice in mathematics that a lot of things will fit together and we don't know the word for that. So when we are, for example, adding, and I say that I needed 10 of something, and I'm sorry, I wasn't ready. Let me get ready. There we go. So I needed 10 of something. And you said, okay, Miss Sky, you need 10 of that. I can do that. So you may start out with saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And you say, Miss Sky, there's your 10 items. There are your 10 items that you have asked for. And I'll say, that is a really good job. You indeed gave me 10 items. So you noticed that you were saying 1 plus 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 1 equals 10. And you're saying, Miss Sky, there has to be a better way. Because if I were counting out something bigger than 10, this would get very old very quickly. So what we learned is that we can actually group things and we can multiply. Using multiplication, we can make this an easier process. So by using groups of, we can make this whole 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 process go away. And we can do it easier. So now if I say that I need 10, you can say, well, Miss Sky, what I noticed in my giving you 10 items, let me put those back, I'm sorry, took them away too soon. What I noticed when I gave you 10 items is I was putting them down in a pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I said 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 again. So what I did is I made 2 groups of 5. And that equaled 10. So Miss Sky, maybe if I made groups of other numbers, that could make adding all of these numbers a lot faster. So Miss Sky, how do I do that? How do I make these groups of equal a different number? So let's do that. Let's try. Now I could take these away because we don't want to do things one at a time anymore. Just whoosh, off to the side that goes. And I'm going to take my 2 back because we're going to use that 2 again. So let's work with 2 real quick. 2, we're going to leave our groups out just for a minute. So let's talk about the number 2. We know that 2 is a really cool number. 2 can be used to make other numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we notice right now that we have 2 groups of 2. Cool, right? Yeah. Now I have 3 groups of 2. I have 4 groups of 2. I have 5 groups of 2. And I have 6 groups of 2. So what I'm doing is I'm making groups of 2. And so we could use that and count by 2s, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, to know that 6 groups of 2 equals 12. So that is basically multiplication. Multiplication is the repeated process of, the process of repeated addition. So we're going to work on some problems here, and I'm going to give us some examples that are really easy, simple, using 2. And you're going to say, Miss Sky, why are you starting with 2? And we'll get to that later. But because, we all know that 1 starts us off, 1. But we're starting with 2 because 2 is going to give us some results that we can see. So we're going to start off the way that we use multiplication. The sign that we use for, let me go back here. The sign that we use for addition is our plus sign. So we remember that sign, the plus sign. But the sign that we use for multiplication is usually an X. And that can get really confusing when you're later down the road and there's X's and X's. But we're not there yet. So we're going to use the X as our symbol to multiply. So we're going to add our X over here to remember that that's for multiplication. We're going to add our plus sign over here. That's a really funny plus sign, but it'll do. We like it all the same. So we have a plus sign to remind us for addition, and we have a X, or an X. We have an X to remind us of multiplication. Miss Sky, get your grammar correct. So we are multiplying, and remember we said that we're working with groups of 2. So Miss Sky needs, let's go back to, let's start with something simple. So Miss Sky needs 6. Now, I could, of course, say, well, Miss Sky, if you need 6, then we know that 3 plus 3 equals 6. Okay, sure. But what do I notice? I have 2 groups of 3 right here in my addition problem. So I know that 2 groups of 3 equals 6. So I can say 2 times 3 equals 6 because I have group 1, and group 2. And you could do that on your paper as well if you see your multiplication problem and you're not sure how to jump forward and get yourself going. Because it can be confusing sometimes when you see it, because sometimes you'll see it like this. You'll see 2 times 3, or you could see it like this, 2 times 3. So it could be either way. 2 times 3 equals, and then we'll do our 6 here, equals 6. So you'll see it both ways, and sometimes that can confuse you. So if you see it, let me get my swipe. Miss Sky, you're not prepared. Oh no. What are you ever going to do, Miss Sky? You're so not prepared for this. That's okay. So I'm going to wipe away that problem. Well, it doesn't want to wipe away today. It just wants to stick around a little longer. That's okay. We'll get it off. All things are well. So you will say, this is group 1. We're just going to do group GRP, and then a 1, and then GRP 2. So now I can see my groups very clearly, and now I can see that I need 2 groups of 3 to equal 6. So as you are doing your problems, I challenge you to circle your groups. If you need to, you can use things and count them out. You can use little bits of paper. You can use playing cards. Think about some other things that are laying around your house that you might be able to use to do your multiplication problems. You may be able to use your Legos or your toy cars. You can make those into groups. I really challenge you in the comments to write down in the comments what other items that you could use. Take some pictures. Show me how you've made groups of different things to create different problems. I'm excited to see that. So let's go ahead and recap. And I'm just going to move this aside for now. Miss Sky can clean up her mess when she's all done. So right now we're going to look at our things to remember about our lesson. And now sometimes, and I didn't mention this earlier, but sometimes people will use a dot instead of an X to multiply. So you see I have here 2.2. That's the same as 2 times 2, which equals 4. Now I know that you're saying, Miss Sky, why did you skip 1 earlier? Well, here's why we skipped 1. Any number times 1 will equal that number. So we notice, remember we're talking in mathematics about patterns. So here's our pattern. 1 times 1 equals 1. 2 times 1 equals 2. Oops, Miss Sky. 3 times 1 equals 3. So we're seeing that pattern. That 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So any number, 100, 111, whatever number you want to pick out of the air will always equal that number when it is times 1. Remember that in our multiplication, it is the process of repeated addition. So we're talking about groups of, and I didn't mean to confuse you there. So groups of, one group of 1. So if I have Miss Sky, 1 group of 1, how many do I have? 1. So I have 1 group of 2. How many do I have? 2. I have 1 group of 3. How many do I have? 1, 2, 3. So any number times 1, 1 group of 1, 1 group of 2, 1 group of 3. Any number times 1 will equal that number. Again, you can pull any number out of the air. 100, 111, 2050. It will always equal that number when you times it by 1. So that is why we didn't go over ones earlier, because I had this great thing to remember that I wanted to go over with you in this process. So keeping up with our things to remember, multiplication is best thought of as repeated addition. Our next thing to remember is we're going to always look for the pattern. Say it with me. Look for the pattern. And we'll remember that multiplication is how many groups of can be made. So remember, like we did in our example down here, how many groups in our first one? We have 1 group of 3 and we have 2 groups of 3. So we made our little problem over here that we had 2 groups of 3. So we could always group our problems to figure out how many groups we're expected to find. And again, let's go over our important vocabulary, that our addition is the process of putting numbers together. We learned that before when we talked about addition. And then today we learned that multiplication is the process of repeated addition, and that we multiply or we times. We say times. T-I-M-E-S. We times things. But that would sound a little silly if we walked around saying, oh, I times it. So we use the mathematical term multiply or multiplication. But we won't judge you or think you're silly if you say times. We'll still love you. So that is our lesson on multiplication. What I would like for you to do in the comment section is for you to comment, like I said earlier, what things around your house that you can create groups of to make your own mathematical multiplication problems. Thank you very much for watching and have a great day.